Hey yo, football fans, it's another great year. Fantasy football fiends, grab your beer. Giving you the best draft tips for your picks. Starts and sits to the waiver wire fix. From my drafts galore to stats that's hardcore. Triple F does it all, have y'all screaming more. So sit back, relax, let the experts prevail. JT Magnum, Siggy Guns never fail. What's up, fantasy football fans? My name is JT Magnum here along with Siggy Guns, and welcome to week 8 of our Fantasy Football Fiends Stardom Situm show. And real quick, as always, we'd like to thank everybody that leaves comments in the comment section and questions on fantasy football. And for the rest of you that are not familiar, if this is your first time watching, there's a ticker at the bottom there, first and foremost. That shows the week 8 rankings, how we feel that based on the week 8, who they're playing on week 8, who we feel is going to the top 15 players in each category. For the ticker at the bottom. And also we run through our injuries, waivers, our starts and sits, and then our sleepers. We like to name players that are not normally, players that, obviously not the elite players, because obviously, like always, you always start your Peyton Mannings, you always start your LaShawn McCoys, as of now, DeMarco Murray, all your, top name receivers, you always start them. You don't sit them, obviously. So, unless it's some crazy matchup or you feel you have to sit them and you have another stud player, on the bench that you're not starting because of that. But other than that, we talk about the other players, players that can help you out. We save the elite talk for the comment section. So feel free to ask us questions in there about that. All right, let's get this started. Let's talk about injuries first and foremost. This week, Reggie Wayne, Calvin Johnson, AJ Green, CJ Spiller, and Fred Jackson are all on the injured list there. And Reggie Wayne just got injured this past week along with CJ Spiller and Fred Jackson in the same game. Calvin Johnson and AJ Green, monitor them. We're not sure if they're playing. It's been like a week-to-week thing with them. AJ Green was all of a sudden ruled out for last week's game. I had no clue he was going to get ruled out, and it just happened like all of a sudden. So monitor those two players if you have them, and have your backups ready just in case. So let's get right into waiver wire pickups. Who's your 3 top waiver wire pickups, Siggy, this week?
Denard Robinson, and then I'm going to have a combo of one person, but really it's 2. It's Anthony Dixon and Bryce Brown for Buffalo, now that you mentioned Fred Jackson and CJ Spiller out. And then the third person is RG3, and a lot of people dropped him, and there's been reports out there that he's already starting to practice, and it doesn't look like Cousins did anything to keep his job. In fact, I think Colt McCoy actually might start this week. So
Colt McCoy's starting.
I would suggest go ahead and pick RG3 up if you're needing some help, especially since the bye week's coming up for a lot of teams and QB, and I can see RG3 picking up where he left off, not necessarily the bad part of him, but as far as, when Cousins look good, I can easily see RG3 looking just as good. It's a good time right now to pick him up.
Yeah, my 3 waiver wires are also Denard Robinson. I have Bryce Brown. I don't think Anthony Dixon is starter material. I think he's a good backup running back. I've seen him. I'm a 49er fan. I've seen him on my team for years. He's not really somebody that you start and looking like he's going to be able to be a starter. Bryce Brown is the perfect combination of speed and power. If you remember him correctly, he was on that Philadelphia Eagles team. He took over when some people got injured, LaShawn McCoy in general, and he did amazing. He had that crazy stretch of 3-week span where he was just killing it. And but the one thing about Bryce Brown, he has a fumbling problem. And that's what's kept him out of being in the starting lineup or being a valid backup. So we'll see what happens with the Bills, how they use him. If he does end up having a little bit of a fumbling problem, I'm pretty sure they'll probably end up using Dixon. But I believe Bryce Brown is the better option of the waiver wire pickups if you're leaning towards somebody that can get you yards and points. My third is Devontae Adams from the Green Bay Packers. He took over when Boykin pretty much is injured, and Boykin hasn't seemed like they haven't used Boykin as much, or they're now turning more to Devontae Adams. So let's get into our stardom portion of the game. Siggy, who's your 3 quarterback must-starts of the week?
The 3 quarterbacks of this week, I got Carson Palmer, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Nick Foles. And I'll go ahead and talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick. I have him usually on my sit list a lot of times, but he's playing Tennessee. And Tennessee is just, I know at home they play a little bit differently. I just see Houston coming off of an embarrassing loss. I mean, it was a loss where it just seemed like they should have. It seemed like Pittsburgh was dead in the water before halftime. Then they just exploded in a 3-minute span there. And I just think Fitzpatrick and the offense in general, I think Houston should light it up against Tennessee this week.
Yeah, and real quick, for those of you that are new to watching this, we run through 3 players in each category that we talk about, and we only talk about one of the players. The reason why we do this is because it's YouTube. We try to keep the video to a minimum of about 30 minutes. We're not looking for an hour show here unless you feel you really want that hour show. I mean, you can let us know in the comment section. Let us know what you want, and we can do that. We could talk about all 3 players and why we feel all 3, for each category should be in there. But we're trying to keep this down to 30 minutes at least, and we're doing it for your benefit, so you don't have to sit there and watch a YouTube video for an hour. I mean, 30 minutes is long enough as it is, and we appreciate the people that do watch it for that long, and we love you, but an hour is a long time for people to watch, especially on YouTube. So that's why we do it that way. So my quarterback starts of the week are Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, and Ryan Tannehill. And I'm going to talk about Russell Wilson. He is quietly he's like the 5th highest rated quarterback in fantasy football right now, and he's rushed for like almost 400 yards. He's got like over 300 yards rushing. He leads all quarterbacks, I believe, in yards rushing. He's had 3 100-yard games this year already. He threw for 300 yards and 100 yards rushing last game against the Rams. I mean, granted it is the Rams, but they have not a great offensive line in Seattle. They have a great run blocking offensive line, but they have not that great of an offensive line for pass blocking. So Russell Wilson at times is running for his life. And he's also taken off, and he's made the most of his opportunities. He's averaging like 8.6 yards per carry, which is just ridiculous. So if you have him this week, they're playing the Panthers. Chances are he's going to be running again, and chances are he's the main focus. The Panthers are going to be keying on Marshawn Lynch. They're going to try to make Russell Wilson beat you, and right now he's making all the right decisions. So I would definitely he's a must start. Pretty much any time you have him, unless you're obviously your first one is Peyton Manning. But still, even then, Russell Wilson might get you rush touchdowns and rushing yards and passing yards plus pass touchdowns. So
yeah, those rushing yards, they definitely add up some points, especially if he's getting those hundreds. Because
he had like 37 points, right? 37 points this past week. That's crazy. So
he was on my start list last week.
Yeah. So who's your 3 running back starts of the week?
I got some names that you probably don't remember. Not I'm playing. Darren McFadden I have on that list. Ben Tate and Doug Martin. I'm going to talk about Darren McFadden. Cleveland has been giving up crazy yardage on the ground, it seems, those last few weeks. And whenever you have I thought Storm Johnson was going to be the guy. He did get a touchdown, but then Denard Robinson comes in and runs all over him. These 2 players in particular are not as good a runner as Darren McFadden. And I also think that Oakland probably finally figured out that the formula should be run the ball first, then throw. And I just think Darren McFadden is set up to have a real nice game against Cleveland. And, I mean, remember when he was supposed to be awesome? This might be the game where he might actually do it.
Yeah, my 3 running backs are actually Darren McFadden. I have Eddie Lacy going against the Saints and Jerick McKinnon. And we're going to talk about Jerick McKinnon because last week you were saying on this show that he was going to he was going to have a great game against the Bills. And I said, Bills have the number 1 defense against the rush. And you were like, nope, I stand by my pick. And what did he do? He ran for 100 yards. Despite people saying, that Asiata apparently was going to start over Jerick McKinnon. We won't get into that. But, it was a great pickup, and right now they're playing Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, Daquan Bowers just got suspended for 4 games, so that's another lineman hurt. They were already giving up a lot of yards as it is, so it's prime and ready for Jerick McKinnon to have another great game, 100 yards rushing probably, and maybe this time score actually some touchdowns. So we'll see. But who's your 3 wide receiver starts of the week?
The 3 wide receivers, Sammy Watkins, Doug Baldwin, and Larry Fitzgerald. And I'm going to talk about Larry Fitzgerald because I know the Watkins and Baldwin is probably, pretty much self-explanatory. Fitzgerald, now that Carson Palmer's back, I know that they didn't have a great game last week. I thought for sure Arizona would have a better showing, and I just think it might have been rust by Carson Palmer. But I do think that with this Bruce Arians offense and Palmer finally back in the fold, I think you're finally going to see Larry Fitzgerald being Larry Fitzgerald. That's obviously his favorite target, and I think that against Philadelphia is a high-flying offense. You know, I got a feeling this is going to be a game where either the Cardinals' defense shows up and stops Philadelphia, or it's going to be a shootout. Either way, I still see Fitzgerald having a big part of the offense, and I see him having a good game.
Yeah, my 3 wide receivers are going to be Jeremy Maclin against the Cardinals, Mike Wallace against the Jaguars, and Golden Tate against the Falcons. And I'm going to talk about Jeremy Maclin. Coming off a bye week now, they're playing the Cardinals. The Cardinals are actually giving up a lot of yards passing, and I think that's due to the fact that they give up no yards rushing. I mean, they're like one of the top teams in the league against the run, and I don't know how they're doing it because they're missing Darnell Dockett, Darrell Washington, Dansby from last year who was on the team, Calais Campbell who was hurt, and hopefully they say he might come back this week, but maybe next week. But still, there's plugging in dudes and still somehow managing to stop the run. I don't know if it's Bruce Arians or their defensive coordinator, whoever it is that is figuring out ways to get them in the right places, but they're just excellent against the run. So Jeremy Maclin, I feel, is going to benefit from that. He's going to have coverage by Peterson and there are others, but Peterson's been known to give up a lot of plays, and Jeremy Maclin's been known to go deep. So we'll see what happens this week. But I believe Jeremy Maclin's going to have a big game against that Cardinals defense. So who's your tight ends?
I can see it. Martellus Bennett, Dwayne Allen, and Jared Cook. And I'll go and talk about Bennett. The one thing the New England Patriots seem to struggle with is big tight ends. And I just think that I see this game, especially being in New England, being a defense or an offensive struggle for Chicago. But I think you're going to have Jay Cutler always look for Bennett in this game. I just think that he's going to have a real big game. And like I said, New England doesn't really stop tight ends that well, and I think he's also primed to have some good touchdown opportunities.
Yeah, my tight ends are Owen Daniels, Jordan Cameron, and Niles Paul. And Jordan Cameron, against the Raiders defense. I mean, the Raiders defense has been absolutely horrible. And Jordan Cameron, the Browns need to use him. I mean, they're trying to get the ball to him, but I don't think it succeeded last game. Brian Hoyer was struggling. They even were talking about benching him for Manziel now. And it's just one bad game for some reason. They're, the week before they killed the Steelers, and he was like, he was like Lord and Savior. And now all of a sudden, one more game, they're talking about benching him for Manziel. Like, it's ongoing with them, but I think, he's going to stick to his guns, still throw the ball to Cameron, and the Raiders aren't going to be able to stop that. So, he's a definitely must start this week for tight ends. Who's your defenses this week?
Some names from last week that didn't really show up, but I'll try again this week with them again. Miami, Cleveland, and Houston. And I'll go ahead and talk about Cleveland. Oakland Raiders has just been a pretty awful team. And then Cleveland, even though they were embarrassed by the Jags last week, I got a feeling that at home and with all the criticism, they'll probably be back to form at least. And I don't see Oakland scoring a lot in Cleveland. So I think Cleveland would have a good defensive showing this time around.
Yeah, my 3 are also Miami. I have Miami against the Jaguars, and I always say it's just because it's against the Jaguars, but Miami's defense is actually really good. They have a great pass rush, and their corners are playing very solid this year. Kansas City playing against the Rams, and Baltimore playing against the Bengals. I'm gonna talk about Kansas City. The Rams, they are a team that's just they jump out to these huge starts, and they got that big game against Seattle last week, but I don't see that happening against Kansas City. That defense is too tough. They get after the quarterback, and they cause too many turnovers, and they're just as good on special teams as the Rams are. So I just think Kansas City is going to give them just a crazy game. I don't even think the Rams are going to score that many points this week, and I think Kansas City is going to benefit from some Austin Davis throws, and they're going to take advantage of it and maybe take a couple to the house because that team, for some reason, always gets turnovers. So I think this week is the week that they start back to that again. So let's get into the sit-em portion of the show. Who's your 3 quarterback must-sits of the week?
Well, you kind of took it from me with that Kansas City bit there. I have Austin Davis, Cam Newton, and Jay Cutler. And I'll go ahead and talk about Cam Newton. I had him as one of my busts of the year in quarterback, and this is just why right here. It's just matchups just aren't good for him. His best receiver has been Benjamin so far, a rookie. And Olsen, obviously, he's been good too. But the offense is struggling, and one of the main reasons why is because that defense has just been horrendous this season.
Yeah, they've been horrible.
And now that Seattle's coming in, which is the team that's really good defensively. I know they're on the road. They're not really that great a team on the road, but coming off of 2 losses in a row, I think Seattle's going to be looking for a little bit of kind of a here we are kind of moment, I believe, and I think Carolina's just going to be the team that's going to get pummeled this time around. And Cam Newton, again, I think he's just going to struggle.
Yeah, he's on my list as well. I have Jay Cutler, Blake Bortles, and Cam Newton. And I'll talk about Cutler since you talked about Newton. And they're playing the Patriots. And the Patriots, I believe they have the number 1 defense against the pass this year. And they have Revis. And Revis is going to be Revis will be on both of them most likely, Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. And I have a feeling that they're going to have a rough time passing, especially with the way New England schemes, the way New England plays defense. If they don't run the ball well against New England, they're going to have a hard time trying to throw it. So I just think that Brandon Marshall's going to suffer this week. Maybe Jeffrey might even suffer a little bit, but Jay Cutler obviously is going to have a hard time running for his life because that offensive line from Chicago is not that great either, and they're all banged up as well. So not a good week for if you have Jay Cutler, if you're a Bears fan.
Bears fan, period.
Yeah. So who's your 3 running back sits?
Justin Forsett, Steven Jackson, and Trey Mason. And I'll go ahead and talk about Justin Forsett because he had a good game last week. Now, Cincinnati, even though they've been getting beat in the air, their rush defense is still pretty good. And I think at home, the only way Baltimore would have a shot at beating them, and I think they're going to have a good game in the air, is going to be to throw, far and, try to get Steve Smith involved. And Torrey Smith, etc. And I just think Forsett is just going to come back to earth a little bit this time around, especially now that everybody's starting to be more healthier as each week goes by.
My 3 running backs, I also have Steven Jackson, who's been just flat out disappointing for Atlanta. Yeah. They don't want to run him. They don't even want to run Antone Smith. Brandon Oliver against the Broncos and Chris Ivory against the Bills. And I'm going to talk about Oliver because he's been crazy good for San Diego over the last few weeks, but they're playing a Broncos team that is ridiculous against the run. They shut Frank Gore down. Obviously, they got really ahead in that game, so they didn't really use Frank Gore. But at the same time, he had like 9 carries for 20 yards at one point. He couldn't get anything. Like he couldn't even get like 5 yards, it seemed like. So Denver's run defense is good. That team is healthy on the front 7. They're amazing on the back end as well. That team is really good, solid against the run. TJ Ward comes up and defends the run probably better than any safety in the league. So I think Brandon Oliver is just going to have a rough game. I don't think he's going to rush for 100 yards. I doubt he might even get 50. So we'll see what happens, but definitely a sit this week. And definitely, if you have him on the bench or if you have him on, he's been one of your stud players the last few weeks, look to sub him for somebody else. Who's your wide receiver sits this week?
I have Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey, and Andre Holmes. And I'll go ahead and talk about Jeffrey since we talked about a little bit about Chicago struggles. I think Revis is going to be spending more time on Jeffrey. And even if he is splitting time with him and Marshall, I think is still the bigger threat in the end zone just because Cutler usually looks his way. That's why I think Bennett would be the benefit of this week, though, over even Marshall. But I just think, again, Chicago's going to struggle in New England, and I think Jeffrey's going to be the guy that's really going to be. Especially Marshall called out Cutler this past week. I don't know if y'all heard about it. They had a fight or something like that, apparently. Yeah. Normally when that happens,
he's done that before.
The best way to shut your best receiver up or whatever is to go ahead and feed him the ball, and I think Marshall will probably get a lot of throws that looks his way. I don't think they're going to, harbor any feelings. So Jeffrey, I think, is going to be the odd man out.
It's funny because on my wide receiver sets, I had Brandon Marshall, Marquez Colston, and Kelvin Benjamin. And I'm going to talk about the opposite of what you just talked about. The reason why I think the Patriots will key on Brandon Marshall is because he is the red zone threat. Therefore, they know he's going to be going for him. Therefore, they're going to make him go to Jeffrey. And if you take Brandon Marshall out of the game, that's pretty much Chicago's game plan. They try to those quick slants to Brandon Marshall. They try to get those quick screens to Alshon Jeffrey to get those guys open in space and let them take off running. They try to throw those fade routes to Brandon Marshall in the end zone. I don't think he's with the way Bill Belichick schemes. There's no way they're gonna let that guy get a fade route in the end zone and not be double teamed. It'll be Bennett and Alshon Jeffrey, in my opinion, that are gonna get those fade routes. Are gonna get those balls thrown if they even when they are in the red zone. So, who's your tight end sits of the week?
Again, I think this is like the 5th week in a row I'm putting him in here. Jason Witten, Cody Fleener, and Delaney Walker. And I'll go ahead and talk about Witten. Escobar all of a sudden is starting to look like the tight end that Romo trusts in the red zone. That was kind of out of nowhere. And Witten, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with him or where he's at, but he's just not been the receiving tight end that he usually is. And I think it's probably more so because he's being used more to block for DeMarco Murray a lot lately, and Murray's just been tearing it up. And whenever you have a running back that can get you, 5-6 yards of play, it seems you're really just looking at that point for receivers. You don't really need to try to worry about a 3rd and 10 looking for a Witten, and I think that's going to continue this week against Washington. There's no way that Romo would need a safety blanket like Witten this week.
Yeah, Escobar just looks more athletic. Just looks taller, more athletic than Witten. Witten looks just old. I mean, he knows how to get open. He knows how to get open. He knows how to find space. But Escobar just looks way more athletic than Witten at this point. But my 3 tight ends are this week are Dwayne Allen, Greg Olsen, and Zach Ertz. And we're going to talk about Greg Olsen because Greg Olsen has been. He's been on fire for the Panthers, but they're playing the Seahawks, and the Seahawks' pass defense, they're just very difficult to pass on with tight ends. The only team that I know of that actually did it this year against them are, Julius Thomas and Antonio Gates. And Antonio Gates had to make 3 crazy catches with crazy perfect throws from Phillip Rivers in order to get those touchdowns. So Seattle's not very kind to tight ends, and I just don't think Greg Olsen's going to have a great week going against that Hawks defense, who's pissed off because they lost last week to those Rams, and they were run all over. They had special teams craziness going against them. I think Seattle's defense is going to step up this week. Who's your defensive sits of the week?
I have Cincinnati, Carolina, and Pittsburgh, and I'll go ahead and talk about Pittsburgh this week because they're playing the Colts. And Pittsburgh at home, their defense has been solid. I wouldn't say it's been great, but you're playing the Colts, and I mean, Andrew Luck is just on fire. And if you thought that Pittsburgh's defense was finally back after last week, you can go ahead and not worry about that this week because Indianapolis is looking unstoppable right now.
Yeah, Indianapolis' defense is, they're on fire. My goodness, they look good. For my 3 defensive sits, San Diego, obviously, going against the Broncos, Chicago against the Patriots, and Green Bay against the Saints. And there's no use to talk about San Diego, and I'll just talk about Green Bay. They've been one of those teams that get a lot of sacks, get a lot of turnovers. They force a lot of things happening with Matthews. They had a great game last week, but this week they're playing the Saints, and given the fact that they're in New Orleans, Drew Brees plays awesome at home. They're going to be passing the ball like crazy. They're going to try to run the ball as well. I mean, I know they're minus Pierre Thomas and they're minus a couple players, but they're still going to run the ball. They're still going to play action. They're still going to pass. I think Green Bay is just not a good matchup this week playing the Saints, so I don't like their defense this week. Who's your 3 sleepers of the week?
Well, you kind of touched up on it with that Green Bay thing. I have Kenny Stills, Chris Johnson, and Brandon LaFell. And I'm going to talk about Kenny Stills. I mean, he doesn't get a lot of targets, but it looks like Drew Brees is always looking his way for a deep pass, and every now and then he'll catch it. And that's why he adds a bunch of yards, after these bombs. And I think with Green Bay's defense just being prone to give up big plays, especially in New Orleans, I would imagine that Kenny Stills is going to be a guy that benefits from. Usually I would say it would be Cooks, but Stills is just that name that no one's really paying attention to, and he's quietly been having some pretty good success, especially late in games.
Oh, yeah. My 3 sleepers are Reggie Bush against the Falcons, Cordarrelle Patterson against the Bucks, and Colt McCoy going against the Raiders. And we're going to talk about Bush. he has been like at the start of the year he like came out the gates pretty good. Then all of a sudden he just tails off. It's what happens to him all the time. He's been banged up a little bit, but I read a little thing about him. He's saying that I've been pretty much banged up since high school. So it is what it is. I play. But
Yeah.
but against the Falcons, I just feel the Falcons aren't great against the run, and they haven't been all year long. So Reggie Bush and Joik Bell are going to be, and I know Reggie Bush is looking to finally take off. So I think he's going to have a lot of explosive plays this week, whether it be catching or running. And he's due for some this week, and I think he's going to get some touchdowns, maybe a couple this week. So look for him. If you have like a sleeper guy, you have some guy on a bye this week because San Francisco and the Giants are on bye. If you have somebody in a bye and you're looking to plug somebody in, you're looking for that that extra flex player or something. Reggie Bush might be the guy you want to put in. All right, well that does it. That does it for the Week 8 Stardom Situm Show. Please leave comments and questions in the comment section. Don't forget to leave feedback as well. All negative feedback will be deleted if it's said in an inappropriate way. We take criticism really well here on the show, but we don't like to have people coming on here just calling us stupid or retards or any kind of weird vulgar languages. There's ways of criticizing. I mean, I've seen people do message me or give great suggestions and help, and we've tried to do that on the show, but try to keep the negativity out of the show and we try to keep a nice atmosphere here, and we try to help people out as best as we can. It's fantasy football. We're not always going to be 100% correct, but we try our best to get it right, and we do pretty well, I think. So anything you want to add?
Clearly he was upset. He was really upset about Asiata not being the guy anymore in Minnesota.
Yeah,
that had to be the reason.
Yeah, so I mean, there's other ones too. I mean, I delete a lot of them, during the week. I delete some of the negative comments. Some of them I leave up there depending on what the criticism actually is. So I give you the benefit of the doubt, but this is our channel. This is this is our network, and we try to run it the best we can. But we try to keep the negativity out. We don't want our fans who support us and love us having to deal with that either. So we just delete them to rather than wasting energy on them, we waste energy on the people that, that we like and support us. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. Best of luck to you guys this week on Week 8 for your fantasy football season. And that's it. We're out. Peace out. Fantasy Football Fiends, Siggy Guns, JT Magnum out.